it's more about persistence and willingness to jump in, start swimming and see what happens, have some faith and see what happens and keep it going.
How do you do? Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Brandstetter, founder and podcast producer at Max Podcasting. And you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 232, which is a palindrome. Hooray. And today's guest is Alex Van Alen, which is almost kind of like a palindrome of a name in itself. But Alex is the founder and CEO of FlingGolf, of World League FlingGolf, as well as New Swarm, the company behind it. And FlingGolf is a crazy cool, clever new sport that is inspired by the likes of golf, lacrosse, and highlight, and even finds inspiration in the snowboarding story. In this episode, we talk what it is like creating a brand new sport, all the crazy hurdles and things to consider, rules, athletes, equipment, marketing, publicity, all that. Alex's favorite parts about the sport, which is his baby. And, his time living in the rainforest in Borneo with a nomadic tribe. It is the man, the van, Alex Van A. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Alex Van Alen, the founder and CEO of FlingGolf, as well as New Swarm, the company behind FlingGolf and all things FlingGolf. Super cool new sport that at the time of this recording is not quite new because celebrating 10-year anniversary. So congrats on that. But Alex, so excited to speak to you today. Thanks for joining. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Max. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm psyched to chat.
Of course. I'm psyched to chat as well. You don't hear that enough. People don't say psyched enough. I always like that. It's like just
Yeah,
full energy.
it's a little old school. I don't know, but yeah, no.
Yeah, so you're a psyched major then. No, but excited to get to FlingGolf. But before that, you actually studied and worked for a while in the worlds of ecology and conservation, areas that I think are pretty cool, but I know like very minimal amount. And we actually had a guest a while back, episode 49, which I did look up before, cards on the table, Steve Woodruff, who goes by the King of Clarity, who he said if he wasn't doing what he does, he would love to be someone who, creates new trails and, takes care of trails and kind of all things in the outdoor space. And that sounds kind of like what you were doing before FlingGolf. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, no, there's definitely truth to that. I had my whole education is in environmental conservation, and I got a master's in ecology. And then my sort of career before FlingGolf was really land conservation. I did some work abroad in Mongolia and Borneo, and worked for the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia, and sort of got to see the world and got to be outdoors a lot, which was great. And I'm looking forward to getting there again someday. But busy with the business right now.
Mongolia and Borneo. That is, I think Borneo, there was a Survivor season there. Maybe Mongolia as well. But pretty unique locations. What were you doing in those areas?
In Borneo, I went right after college, and I was fascinated by this nomadic tribe up in the rainforest. And I talked to a guy in college who had been up, with them. And I mean, this is really remote Borneo. And I just sort of got obsessed with the idea of going up and living with these people and understanding them a little bit better. And this crazy adventure getting over there. It was easy getting to Malaysia, but then getting up into the rainforest, which was highly illegal at the time. The government was not very happy about any Westerners going up there, but I did manage to get up there and trek, for quite a few days through the rainforest to get to this tribe. And then I was with them for about 3 weeks. A fascinating, amazing time in my life, and amazing people.
That is amazing. Oh my God. Is Borneo in Malaysia? I don't even know where it is.
Well, Borneo is actually an island that has 3 countries. Most of it is Indonesia, and then Malaysia, and then there's a little tiny country called Brunei, which is a very small little kingdom, but has a massive natural gas I think it's the richest country per capita in the world. They've got a huge natural gas fields,
Oh, wow.
but it's mostly rainforest. Yeah.
Mostly rainforest. So here you are for weeks living in the rainforest with the tribe that probably like, who the hell is this, future FlingGolf inventor that's,
Yeah,
trying to
right.
cramp our style. But how was your experience overall? Like any really, really interesting things you took away from that?
I was going over there, went over there by myself, and then I met this guy from New Zealand, and I sort of told him what I was up to, and he came along with me. So we had a good, it's good to have another partner along for the ride. There was a lot of deforestation going on in the rainforest at that time, and unfortunately, there still is. This tribe was they're a very peaceful tribe, but they were fighting putting up these blockades on logging roads and all that. So we sort of I won't say we got involved in that, but we saw it and we talked to them about it and sort of understood what they were fighting against. And anyway, that led to another trip back to Borneo later. And I worked with a guy named Wade Davis on a book about that. So this is back in the 90s. So quite a while ago. Really, it's just fascinating people, obviously an incredible environment. And now I was very blessed to be able to go over there at that time.
This particular tribe, besides like, living in the rainforest and, dealing with deforestation and like, crazy things like that, what would you say is, the biggest difference in their lives versus like the lives, we're just kind of accustomed to ourselves?
Wow, yeah, it's pretty massive difference. This tribe in particular was nomadic, so they didn't stay. They would build these structures, and then I mean they would stay there maybe for a month or 2 months and hunt. There's hunter gatherers, and they had blowpipes with poison darts. The whole thing. But then they would move on to another place, and they, over years they would go back to the same places. They knew the rainforest back and forth, every little creek and valley. But then their settlements would just disappear, melt into the rainforest, rot, and they'd build a new one. And it was just an incredibly simple, I guess, prehistoric lifestyle. But they were wonderful people. I mean, really gentle. This tribe in particular, a lot of Borneo had head hunting tribes, and this tribe was not headhunters, and but they were the farthest up, most remote in the highest regions of Borneo. But some of the other tribes were headhunters, and they don't do it today, but they had done it up until the 1940s, I think.
Headhunters, is that what it sounds like?
That is what it is. Yes, exactly. I actually stayed with one tribe called the Iban tribe, and they continue to do their ceremonies, and they had in their longhouses, which are these long sort of almost apartment buildings they built in the rainforest. Hanging from the rafters were these woven baskets of skulls that they had kept over the years and the decades, and they would continue to do these ceremonies every year, living out these head hunting dances and amazing stuff. And they had all the swords. I brought one of the head hunting swords back with me, which is kind of cool.
Oh my god, I don't think I'll ever think of the term headhunter again. Like when you hear about like recruiters that are headhunters, that
Yeah, no, very different.
slightly different.
Yeah.
But that's an incredible experience overall. What would you say is the top thing that you took away from that experience that kind of shaped like your interests or what you wanted to do in life?
Yeah, I think I mean, I had always been from very early age, interested in the environment and protecting the environment. And that was what really drew me over there was this culture that had been, for literally hundreds of thousands of years, the same was now being threatened because of the deforestation in the rainforest. And sort of, lived with that since then. Really, how do I work towards protecting the planet in a way? And it's interesting. FlingGolf is not directly involved in that, but I would like to make it. But I'm fascinated by this intersection of capitalism and how that's changing to actually protect the planet. And it very slowly, but we're turning that tanker or whatever that boat right now. I hope to use the forces of capitalism to do good for the environment and for other causes as well.
So that is a perfect segue. I was just about to transition, and you did it for us. So thank you. You've done your homework. But
Excellent.
let's get to FlingGolf. And as you alluded to, there are certainly plenty of opportunities that you can tie that back to your passions. But I think one thing in common is that it is all about the outdoors and being out there and enjoying nature and enjoying, the land around you. And it's a really, really clever sport that, again, is, 10 years old now. Inventing a new sport is, I think, something that maybe, a decent amount of people have thought of, but not many people have actually gone and tried to, like break the mold of the, whatever there are, like dozen like main sports that are out there in traditional sports. When did the thought first pop in your mind of, oh, I could start something new here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the origins of it were growing up. I played a little lacrosse and I played some golf and a lot of other different sports. And when I was a kid, my brothers and I and some neighbors would play this game where we use a lacrosse stick and threw golf balls around the farm, hitting trees and going across ponds and things like that, and counting our scores along the way. So sort of lacrosse golf. And that was a long time ago. And then just a bunch of things came together 10 or so years ago to really, I just sort of got obsessed with this idea. How far can I throw a golf ball? And, lacrosse stick can throw it with no real feel, maybe 50 yards, 60 yards. But then I started putting pieces together of different toys and equipment, golf clubs, things like that, to really see how far I could throw a golf ball. And I was getting through these like early, you call them prototypes, I guess, maybe 80, 90 yards, maybe max. I was at an antique store. We live in New England. There are tons of antique stores around. I saw it in the window, this High cesta, which I don't know if you're familiar with High.
Yeah, yeah. I know you're talking about the sport. I mean, I think now it's especially well known for Cigar City Brewery in Tampa. Their most popular IPA is High IPA. But yeah,
Oh, is that right?
familiar with the sport, and yeah, it's been in like Mad Men, it's been in Jackass. Yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah, it's a pretty random sport. Not a lot of people play it in the U.S., and I think it originated in the Basque Country near Spain. But then they play it, I think Miami, Fort Lauderdale, a few places. I think they played it in Hartford at one point, but not many places. Anyway, I got this highlight basket, and that sort of technologically, it's amazing. This thing is literally made out of wicker, and you put it on your hand. It's this big scoop that you throw a ball against a wall, and it bounces back. You catch it, or your opponent catches it and throws it against the wall. So it's like racquetball, but instead of hitting the ball, you're catching and throwing it. And I started throwing golf balls out of that, and I was like, "Whoa!" It just had a whole different feel, and it just shot the ball out of the cesta. And whereas before it was just like just everything I could put into it, I was getting 80 yards, and with a highlight cesta, I was getting a lot more yardage and a lot more feel, and actually being able to shape the shots different ways and spin them different ways, so I could have a little bit of fade, a little bit of a draw, depending on how I swung it. So that was a big step forward in creating the fling stick, which is the equipment used to play fling golf. That was a big moment to get that sort of extra distance. And that really made me, I always believed there was something there, but that really made me just, the feel of it made me believe that I could create something you could throw the golf ball that far. And then it was a matter of, okay, prototyping that out, building that out. And then, okay, now I got to develop a sport and
Yeah,
introduce it onto the most traditional, place in the world, which is the golf courses.
yeah. Small task there. Well, first of all, I think a lot of people haven't even heard of High Lie.
I'd heard about Highlight just visiting my grandparents in Florida, as a kid, and I remember seeing like billboards and stuff like that. And so I saw some videos on it, like I guess when I was younger. And then I recognized it when I was walking by this, antique shop in Essex, Mass.
It's so funny to think about that. I mentioned that it's been on Mad Men. I mean, there's literally, I don't know. There's at some point in the series, somebody has the idea that highlight is like the next big new sport that can take over
Yes.
America. So that's back in like the '60s, but like clearly for like decades beyond that, there was a big marketing push for it. So that's really really funny. So you got the prototype together for the actual fling stick, which is just a fun word in itself. But how long did it take to get to a design that you were really, really happy with and actually worked?
It was about probably a year and a half of prototyping. This is while I have another job and everything like that, so I hadn't quit my job to do that yet.
This is while you're hanging out with tribes in Borneo.
No, 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 this is way, way later than that. Yeah, way later than that. It took about 18 months, I guess, to really get something that I felt was ready to go. And then it's a big big step to go, okay, now I got to pay for a mold, to produce the head and different vendors to get the shafts and the grips and all that. So that was a whole other level.
I mean, there's so many different pieces to it, components of it if you break it down. But was there any particular insight while you were prototyping that like really helped move you guys ahead?
Yeah. I mean, I fortunately I've been introduced to a product developer, and they really helped with all of those details. I knew nothing about prototyping. Yeah, I knew nothing about running a business, to be honest. I just sort of jumped in with both feet, and they helped a lot with that process. They developed these vinyl cut, and, put all these pieces together to really, you should see the first prototypes. They're huge and they're big. They're basically the size of a highlight sensor, which is probably like 3 feet long. And we started studying video of highlight and realized that you don't need that whole basket. That's really for catching more than throwing. And we weren't doing any catching in FlingGolf. So we really realized the whole game is almost played on the last 3 inches of the highlight cesta. And I mean, even the catching, sometimes they just catch them the very tip and then throw it again because they have to throw it in one big motion. So that was a big moment when we realized, okay, we just need something that's like 3 inches long. It doesn't need to be, 3 feet long. So in a sense, we have a little mini highlight basket on the end of a stick, on the end of what looks like a golf club shaft and grip.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's a really strong insight of like you don't need the whole thing. I think for people to try out a new sport, of course the equipment has to be easy to use and like not look like it's like you're wearing clown shoes around everywhere, like with the giant scoop thing.
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
so I'm glad you unlocked that. How about in terms of the rules? Like how did you go about and break down like, all right, this, clearly it has elements of golf, it has elements of lacrosse, it has elements of highlight. How'd you go about and say, all right, this is the biggest difference between golf here, these are the rules that will set fling golf apart?
Yeah, well, one thing we did not want to do, and so remember, this is in 15, 16, I guess. Golf was having real problems pre-COVID. They were having real problems attracting new players. I think 200 courses were closing each year. And so one thing, very clear, we did not want to be that cumbersome, so many rules that nobody knows what all the rules of golf are. I mean, it's just way too detailed. And we had the advantage of not having to worry about the lie. And a lot of those rules of golf are about the lie and whether you can ground your club, can't ground your club, can't touch the ball, move the ball. In fling golf, you just pick the ball up and you take a few steps back and then you throw it again. So it's very, very simple. Those rules, we kept it very basic. But of course, when you get into real competition, you've got to really refine the rules so that anything that happens during that competition, you've got an answer for. Like, yes, you can do this. No, you can't do that. And you have to make sure it's obviously equal. People are playing for money, trophies and stuff like that. You don't want to be like, we didn't really figure that out. So we spent a fair amount of time really honing those rules in and getting a lot of player feedback. But we really have focused on our players and supporting our players. We don't see them as them supporting our business. We see us as supporting our players because they are what's going to drive this and what is driving this. So really one of our mottos is player driven. And so we rely on them to, the best players and the most frequent players to really give us feedback on rules. And so we've had a lot of discussions on that front. And so far, it's worked out well in the tournaments. We haven't had any problems. I think we've covered most of it. And our rules really come down to about 4 or 5 pages. Whereas if you look at USGA golf rules, I think there's 294 pages.
I was going to
Insane.
say I would bet over 5 pages. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That focus on players is hugely important. I mean, you hear businesses talking about like, customers, king, queen, customers, everything. And it's kind of different when you're like, technically, yeah, they can be customers, but when you're with a sport, it's totally different mindset when you think about them as players and what you can do to support them. So keeping that focus on players, getting that player feedback, what does that look like today? Like how have you created a way to get feedback and keep the emphasis on the players?
We started before COVID. We were developing this World League Fling Golf, so the official, league of the sport. And then COVID hit. Obviously, that completely squashed that. People weren't flying around going to tournaments and stuff like that. But there was a lot of play on golf courses. It was one of the best places you could be, socially distanced, and a lot of families were playing. So we had that advantage of a lot more players getting out there during those 2 years or so of COVID. And then right as COVID sort of was breaking, we got back in the saddle of growing the sport and growing the league, I should say. And that sort of coincided with ESPN giving us a call, and they had seen some of our earlier tournaments and seen some of the stuff we'd done on YouTube, and they gave us a call, said we'd like to partner with you on your next tournament. So that kind of kicked us into high gear, and we had sort of first national tournament in Delaware, and that was a huge success. It was the first time the players really got together. For me, I'd always looked at snowboarding as a model. I'm old enough to remember when snowboarding was first coming in
You
the
take that
80s.
back. You take that back. You're a spring chicken.
No, I really am. In ski resorts where all of a sudden you see all these snowboarders come on, and it started growing that way. Obviously, there was a lot of resistance, but you see what snowboarding has become, and it still is. It really changed in my mind, or really exemplified this awesome balance of competition and camaraderie, where you see snowboarders go out there, compete against each other, and someone will beat them. They'll be standing on the podium, and someone will beat them, and they're psyched that they got beat because they're amazed at the tricks that they just did, or whatever they did coming down the half pipe or whatever. And I just love that. I just thought that was so cool, because these guys, and girls, really push themselves hard to compete, but they're still just such great sports. And so when that came around to our first national tournament, it really exemplified what this community was, because it was the first time they all met each other. They Through social media, they've been in groups and this and that, but first time they met each other, and they played really hard and took it really seriously, but with a very wide demographic. They all got along great, and I mean really great, and are really became very close friends, and it's just grown from there. So we just feel that through this league, we want to grow that feeling and really focus on the players and supporting them, so that vibe can grow, because I think that's what's really going to drive the sport even more.
What's going through your mind when you get a call, which may be a prank call or maybe real,
Yeah.
and you find out that ESPN is interested in what you created?
Yeah, I think if I remember right, it was an email that we got, and I was driving somewhere, and my partner called up and he said, do you see that email we just got? And, looked at it, and I was like, oh, it's definitely a crank email. We had so many ridiculous emails of like, you should do this, you should do that, or, you know, just stuff trying to get you to click or whatever. And took a look through it, and he was like, I think this is real. It's real. And so anyway, it turns out it was. We, got in touch with the woman who would call us or emailed us, and sort of went from there.
That is so cool. I mean, in the sports world, of course, ESPN has been for decades and decades. What, 50 years now? Been a worldwide leader in sports. So talk about validation for what you created. That's amazing. One of the other things that is like a fascinating challenge about your business is that golf has been around forever, and these golf courses, so many of them around the U.S., around the world, are so storied and I mean just beautiful and like so well kept overall. But there's like a really traditional golf culture around them, and there's golf attire and everything there. But how do you break? And I noticed that on your site you use the term liberate as far as people playing fling golf at a course for the first time. But how did you first start, quote unquote, breaking onto these courses to play fling golf instead of traditional golf there?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think I was fortunate to start when golf courses were struggling, which they aren't really anymore. They had a real boost with COVID. And so they were listening. They were like, look, if we can get more players on, and they needed to get younger players on. They were listening to what I had to say. And so I worked with, one of the first things I did was got in touch with the National Golf Course Owners Association. And I went to a few of their conferences and got to know the course owners, and really sort of understand that their world and what their needs were. And so there was a lot of interest. there's some lip service to it, like, oh yeah, that sounds cool, we love it, and not really, but because there is a lot of tradition in golf. But there was enough interest that enough people listened to me and actually bought sticks and got things going that way. But the other thing about golf that I came to learn, I didn't really know much about the industry, but what I came to learn is, there are 15,000 golf courses in the US alone. And so what you see on TV with Tiger Woods or any of these guys playing, they're playing the top end, nice formal courses, but there are literally 10,000, 12,000 informal courses that are, or much less formal courses that are really, mom and pop operations. And I always like to sort of equate them with farmers. And, they own 200 acres. It may have been in their family for generations, and they're struggling and they're really, really trying to figure out how to make revenue. They're more open than the traditional ones, which are always going to do okay, or the private clubs, which are always going to do okay. They've always got a safety net, but the mom and pops, which are charging $22 a round for people to come play, they're struggling. So when people weren't interested in golf, they would listen to what I had to say. We had a few courses, a few hundred courses that bought sticks and were pushing it out and doing a pretty good job marketing, but not too much. But what it really came down to is the golf courses saying, look, if you bring the players, we'll let them play. We have no problem with them coming and playing. So that after the first few years, and I wish I had been quicker about it, of really focusing on the golf courses and educating them, really started focusing on, okay, we have to grow this player base. We can't rely on the golf courses to grow their own player base. That was really a sort of change in strategy for us.
If you're thinking your business needs a change in strategy, one way to do so is with a podcast. It can really add new life to your business, open doors. You never know what it can turn into. But you do know that you'll need some tips when it comes to launching a podcast, producing a podcast, marketing a podcast, all sorts of stuff, sentences that end with podcast. And your place to learn all these things, as well as be inspired from the entrepreneurship standpoint, and sprinkle in some awful puns, is the Podcasting to the Max newsletter. It comes straight to you every Thursday, and you can sign up at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. Now, let's dive into the wide world of inventing sports. So let's change strategy a little bit and move to inspiration and creativity. So, typically this is about how you, on the personal side, stay inspired, come up with creative ideas. But I just keep going back to this fascinating point that creating a new sport, like there's so much involved there, and all the things that you talk through, it's like, yeah, there's so many things to consider, like the fling stick, the courses, relationships with the players, as well as golf course owners, the whole marketing side of it. Like there's endless things to do. So thank you for, again, for making time for this interview. But starting a new sport, overall, what would you say are some like building blocks that, like, hey, if you're going to start like a brand new sport in this crazy, popular but crowded space, what does it take?
Yeah, I think no matter how you slice it, it takes time, and more time than I thought. But I think I'm not the only entrepreneur who thought things were going to go faster than they did.
That's it. You're the only one. You're the only one that doesn't like prototyping either. No,
Right.
that doesn't know about it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. No, it takes time, and it just takes time to grow something. And we consider, partners and I really consider we're doing something big here. We really believe that this is a sport for hundreds of years to come, and is going to be played by millions of players. And so we kind of take that mindset, like, okay, it's going to take some time. But I was inspired, or I should say, I sort of lean on the story of snowboarding and Jake Carpenter, who started Burton Snowboards, and back in the 70s, 80s, and I really studied sort of what he had gone through and how long it took him to get going. Because now you look at Burton and you're in snowboarding, you're like, oh, it's just there.
Yeah. Well, I never even thought about snowboarding in that. Like, you go to a mountain, and often most places there's more skiers than snowboarders, but still, like, snowboarding is such a staple that you don't even think of it as like, hey, this wasn't always there. Like, this came way after skiing.
Yeah, no, it was way after skiing, and it had a lot of challenges getting on the mountains. And yeah, from what I understand, snowboarders didn't have as much control early on as skiers did, but of course they do now.
Yeah, it depends who you ask, but
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's right. I guess there's still some out there. But yeah, no, snowboarding in its heyday, I think was 40% of the lift tickets. So it actually got up there. So I look at that story for inspiration and also sort of for faith, I guess, in a way that, you keep on plugging away and things happen. And that's what I've seen happen is that you just stay persistent with it, and out of the blue, you'll get a call from Shark Tank. Out of the blue, you'll get a call from ESPN, and things start to snowball. It was I look back at that story a lot, and what he did, how long it took him to get going, but then things really picked up, and then they started rolling quickly. So we're sort of in that process right now.
Right. So it takes a lot of time, but it can snowball in a beautiful way. Back to your snowboarding metaphor.
Yeah,
And then a tricky part about launching a new sport is like you want people to try it, and you want people to love it and tell their friends and everything in that world, but you don't want to like come across like you're insulting golf or insulting lacrosse or like stepping on these other sports. So how are you making sure that you're careful about this is something that can be an addition, not like screw those other sports?
yeah, no, no, not at all. Not a problem with lacrosse, but with golf, yeah, you have to tread a little bit of a fine line. We're sort of confident enough now. We've got a big enough player base that we can poke a little bit of fun at golf, but because of its old traditions and its stodgy stigma that it has. But honestly, a lot of golf companies are doing that same thing because they know that that's not a winning formula to be super traditional and old school. And I mean, you look at Top Golf, and Callaway owns Top Golf, and that's a fun thing, right? Go out there and drink a bunch of beers and have fun with your friends. It's like sort of like bowling, but that's not a traditional way to experience golf. And so we're sort of in that same boat, right? That we're a different way to experience the golf course. And honestly, I think we figured out about 60% of our players are also golfers. So there is that sort of, you can do both. I mean, literally, we have players that have fling sticks in their bags, and they might play both at the same time. So it's really that sort of seamless with getting out on a golf course. You got families that, mom and dad can play golf, and the kids can play fling golf, or the wife plays golf, the husband plays fling golf, whatever it is, but you can play at exactly the same time.
What is it for those that do both? Ambidextrous, traditional and fling golfers. What is it that says I feel like playing fling golf today instead of traditional golf?
From my point of view, it's that, hey, do you want to have fun? And it's athletic. It's way more intuitive than golf. Golf is, you have to go through your swing thought routine, and chances are you're going to slice it or hook it anyway. And fling golf, you're pretty guaranteed with any sort of level of athleticism. You're pretty much guaranteed you're going to have a fun time getting out on the course, and you're not going to lose your balls. And for just basic beginners, you're going to get it down the middle, and you're going to pop it down the middle, and it's just fun to be out there. Of course, for the real good players, they get more competitive and more athletic, and it's about shaping those shots, and it's just a thrill. It's honestly, I played a lot of golf, and you get the perfect ball strike if you're lucky 3 or 4 times around. And with fling golf, you really get that feeling each shot. It just fires out of the basket, and it's kind of an exhilarating feeling.
Totally can get behind that, and I can also get behind your quote. Not going to lose your balls. I think that's a great soundbite that we can have a lot of fun with. So thank you for that. Speaking of the unusual and inappropriate, let's get to a fun segment called The Unusual. So this is totally about you on the personal side. Most of the time doesn't tie back to your business, but you can tie it back if you want. But pet peeves, quirks, weird talents. So, in addition to being a talented fling golfer, is there a name for fling golfers? Or you call them fling golfers or flingers? Is
Yeah,
there
fling golfers. Yep.
flingers can mean something else. Who even knows? But
Right, right, right.
what's a weird talent or like a party trick, something minor that you're just really good at?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you.
It's a tough question, actually. I'm not sure. I mean, I got some quirks, definitely. I've got some,
Your weird talent is seamlessly segueing from weird talents to quirks.
Okay. All right, good.
What quirks do you have?
Bringing back my sort of interest in conservation, my family sort of laughs at me a little bit because I've been geeking out on conservation, like energy conservation, and so I like analyze how many miles I drive in my car, and how much oil I use in my house, and how much electricity I use in my house. And I like set this goal last year to try to really reduce that. And so I'm doing all these crazy things like I can put my clothes out to dry on a line and stuff like that. Try not to drive my car so much, but my family thinks it's pretty funny.
Yeah, like exactly. Are you like extra diligent with it, or you won't let anybody drive without checking
I don't. I try not to incorporate my family too much into it because I know it'll bug them. But
it?
they come along for the ride a little bit. But no, I just sort of keep it to myself.
What about pet peeves? What's something that just grinds your gears a little bit?
Yeah, it's I'm definitely not type A. I don't think anyone would call me type A, but one thing that drives me crazy is, when your windows are all fogged up in your car, and
Oh yeah.
my kids will like take their hand and use it to clear the fog off the window, and of course that comes back to bite you. All these hand marks and everything, like the oil from your hand gets all over, and I'm like, "No, stop it." And
Oh man, learned that the hard way in college. There was one time where I don't know, we like stopped at the mall nearby and I don't know, bought something and picked up food. It was one of those crazy cold days and it was just like so foggy and so much. I was like, I don't want to sit here for 10 minutes while it like tries to defog and it's not going to work. So I just did that. And then it was like, that mark was on the car for a long time.
yeah, and then you gotta go through the whole process of Windexing it off or whatever. So
Yeah. I still haven't recovered to this day. No, but
that's
let's,
a tough one.
let's go from tough ones to yeah. Actually, these might be tough as well. Yeah, I'm just keeping you on the edge of your seat. But let's wrap up with rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
All right,
All right, let's get wild. The town that you're based in is called Amesbury or Amesbury?
Amesbury.
Amesbury. Okay, I didn't know if it was like an old school New England pronunciation. That wasn't the actual question. The question is, I saw that it's literally on the New Hampshire border. And I don't know if it's New Hampshire or New Hampshire. I just can't pronounce anything. So you're like in the heart of New England. What's your favorite part of living in the New England area?
Definitely the ocean. Yeah, I moved up here for the ocean and for boating.
Oh yeah, those are nice, especially in the summertime. Probably a bit cold over the winter.
It's a bit cold in the wintertime. Yeah, it's not the best, but yeah, summertime is phenomenal.
Who would be your dream celebrity or athlete ambassador for FlingGolf?
I think Rob Gronkowski would be phenomenal. He's just got the right he's got the right attitude about it. He's just all about fun and athleticism, and that's really what sort of encapsulates fling golf. So yeah, to see him bombing them out on the golf course would be great.
That would yeah, he seems to fit. He's perfect with like fun and camaraderie and athletics. So that's yeah, it'd
Yeah,
be
he doesn't
perfect.
take himself too seriously, which we try not to. But yeah, he'd be a great one.
He's very marketable. So yeah, maybe within the next couple of years we'll strike something up with him. That would be awesome. How about I confirmed with you before the episode, so I knew how to pronounce it, but I'm sure a lot people think your name is Van Alen, like Van Halen. How
Yeah.
often do you get confused to be a part of the Van Halen family?
Yeah, well, my name is Alex Van Halen. My name is Alex Van Allen, but I hand my credit card over or my driver's license. People are like, "Oh, Alex Van Halen." Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun little thing, and I like to think we're cousins, and maybe we are way back in the old country.
Right.
Just change the name a little bit, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. It would be interesting to go back and see if it was always pronounced Van Allen or if that changed somewhere along the way and it was Van Alen or Van Halen. You never know. But in good company there. What is the longest distance that a fling golf drive or shot, whatever you want to call it, has been recorded?
The longest recorded one was 252 yards, and we had a competition back in 2019. It was a defenseman, a professional lacrosse defenseman named Sean Lawton, and he's probably like 6'4", 220 or something like that, and he just crushed it. So 252 is the longest. We're pretty sure other people have done it longer, but we've never actually officially recorded it longer.
That's some serious strength flying
Yeah.
there. And then last one, you might be the only person I've ever spoken to that has lived in the rainforest for more than like a 2 hour tour. So what is your best tip for actually living in the rainforest?
Best tip I got over there was, or before I left, was you can't wear boots in the rainforest. You just got to go full on. I just had running shoes and just stuff you can take off and on regularly, and and everything's gonna get soaking wet, so you might as well almost not even have them. But they also help with keeping some leeches off your feet, which I had plenty of
Ooh,
those.
oh my God, that's important. But that also okay. So I didn't lie. I just thought of this though. Is someone like most people that hates being soaking wet? How do you like mentally just deal with it? Raining and being wet so often.
Yeah, I guess you just don't have any choice.
Yeah, to
It's
just
really
deal with it.
Yeah, there's no point in in being bummed about it because you're just gonna be wet. It's just gonna rain all the time. And the way that the Panan tribe that I was with and the others, they just barely wear any clothes because it's warm enough. And if you just have a loincloth on, there's not much to get wet. So I did not wear a loincloth, but I just swim shorts and a t-shirt and took off the t-shirt a lot. But there's no point just having wet stuff on you all the time.
I might have to adopt that. Just not wearing much. I think it's a good way to go about life. But Alex, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic and fascinating, and all things FlingGolf and everything your story and beyond. Thanks for coming on. And where is the best place for people to learn more and try out FlingGolf, and if they want to connect with you online?
Yeah, absolutely. FlingGolf.com. You've got two G's, and then all of our social media is at FlingGolf. So that's a good place for people to check it out. If you're on Facebook, we have a FlingGolf Players group, which is a really fun place to check out, see what the players are doing, and join in and ask questions. So that's just called FlingGolf Players.
And 2Gs, I think you can incorporate that into your marketing as well. But perfect. Last thing, final thoughts. Stage is yours. It could be a quote. It could be just kind of words of wisdom to leave us with. Whatever you want. Send us home here.
I think for anybody listening, anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur is you don't have to be. I was not an A student. I was definitely C student. It's more about persistence and willingness to jump in, start swimming, and see what happens. Have some faith and see what happens, and keep it going.
Well, Alex, I give you an A+ for the interview and for FlingGolf. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your flingtastic story and all that you do. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. And then fling it up with them. Do some flinging, some fling golfing. You can also find us on Good Pods, where there are some good pods. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at maxpodcasting.com and sign up for free for the Podcasting to the Max newsletter. That's at maxpodcasting.com/newsletter. Until next time, let your business run wild. Bring on the bongos!